RS GT rear-wheel drive represents the end of the Audi R8 as we know it. So we're going to go back to the start, the very start.
If you enjoy this film, then please think about joining the Hagerty Drivers Club. You get a magazine that's award-winning and there's 24/7 roadside assistance. To discover all the benefits or simply appease the algorithm, just click on the link in the description down below.
With 611 brake horsepower, this is the most powerful rear-wheel drive R8 ever. And that's really appropriate, the fact that it is rear-wheel drive, because the R8 changed the perception of what Audi handling could be like. Even before they took the extraordinary step of removing the front drive shafts and going rear-wheel drive in the rear-wheel series, the R8 was always happy to oversteer, even with Quattro.
It was a viscous coupling for the Quattro system in the first gen R8, and then there was a switch to a Haldex multi-plate clutch system for the second generation. But the rear burst result has really always been the same.
As if to really ram home the point about this being rear-wheel drive and not being understeery, they've given this for the first time something called torque rear, which is a bit of an awkward name, but when you put it in performance, you then have 7 levels you can dial in to help you oversteer. To be honest, I don't actually like it very much because it seems to kind of, well, want to second guess you, so I'd much rather just turn everything off. Then it feels, well, much more natural. You are always aware that you've got a big V10 behind you when it starts to slide, but it can carry some massive angles.
Since the R8 came along, we've had things like the Sport differential, and I'd say the general perception of Audi handling, while still not as wild as BMW M or AMG, is much more dynamic. It just looks so good, doesn't it?
But then the Audi R8 has always been a fabulous looking car. Perhaps the most noteworthy thing about those early cars was the side blade down here, which obviously they split up for these later cars. This one is undoubtedly the most aggressive R8 I have ever seen. Generates 300 kilos of downforce, 199 miles an hour, which is twice that, or over twice in fact, of any other R8. Thanks to larger splitter, these dive planes here, moving down to the back, the enormous swan neck rear wing and the huge diffuser. Of course, it also reminds us of Audi's GT race cars.
Since its launch in 2009, the R8 LMS GT3 car has won the Nürburgring 24 Hours 6 times, and it's taken another 10 victories at other 24-hour races all around the world. Safe to say that driving through the night is an R8 strong point for both race and road cars.
In 2014, the R8 became the first car to bring lasers, laser lights, to the road. And that sort of annoyed BMW a bit because they thought they were going to get there first with the i8. But no, the R8 was first with the limited edition, produced in just 99 units, R8 LMX.
The Audi R8 was also the first car to have full LED headlights back in 2007. And since the LMX, frickin' laser beams have been a feature on many R8s, including this one.
The laser is actually blue when it comes out, but then it goes through a phosphor converter, which changes the colour to a colour temperature of 5,500 Kelvin, or nice bright white, and that's emitted in a spotlight right in the middle, and it really does work so well. It basically doubles the length you can see at night. It only comes on above 70 kilometers an hour or 46 miles an hour, and you really notice it when it does. Right, back to daytime, I think. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Or perhaps that should be the bull in the garage. Yes, Lamborghini. Because lots of people think of the R8 as just, well, for people that couldn't afford a Gallardo or a Hurricane. But that's simply not true. Because, yes, whilst the very original concept might have been a reclothed Gallardo complete with V10 engine, when the R8 came out, it was really quite different. It was better. Not only did it have a different engine in that V8, it was, well, somehow more rounded, more complete as a package and better to drive.
Not to mention the fact that it cost less than £80,000 when it first went on sale in the UK. Sadly, you'd need 2.5 times as much to buy this last of the line car.
And a big part of its brilliance was its usability. Now that might not sound particularly sexy, but it's what enabled it to really take the fight to the Porsche 911, the king of all sports cars, the default. What's more, I think it's actually influenced supercars above it, including Lamborghinis, because if you look at them now, things like the 720S or all the Ferrari mid-engine cars, and look at just how usable they are, how you don't even question the fact that you could jump into one and do a long journey in it. I think a lot of that potentially came from the R8. And I mean this car in particular, number 332, represents that usability brilliantly. You see, the GT rear-wheel drive can, as an option, have 18-way adjustable dampers. And at first I thought, well, that's obviously what you'd want. I want to try those. They're like the ones in the RS4 competition that were brilliant. But this car doesn't have those. Nope, it has the standard suspension. Initially, yes, I was a bit disappointed, but somehow having the standard dampers and the breadth of ability that comes with them, the unmittingly brilliant ride quality in comfort mode, means that this, well, does what the R8 has always been brilliant at. It means you can drive it every day, yet also get to a road like this and just pick it apart.
It's helped by a nice set of forged wheels which save some unsprung mass, and along with a carbon anti-roll bar and bucket seats, save 20 kilos overall. Probably not enough to get Tony Stark excited, but every little helps.
This is a really bumpy bit of road, but it deals with it so beautifully. It's always felt like quite a polite car in some respects. It doesn't goad you, it doesn't egg you on, but the performance is always there.
The R8 could have been even more usable though, or at least had better MPG.
You see, there was an R8 that ran not on petrol, but diesel. Back in 2008, they did a concept car, and you might be thinking, oh, some sort of 4-cylinder thing, but no, it had a 6-litre twin-turbo V12 derived from the R10 Le Mans car in the back of an R8. They didn't actually have to change chassis or anything. I drove it, and, well, it was strange, because the numbers said it had 500 horsepower and 1,000 newton meters of torque, which is 737 pounds-feet, but the one I drove didn't, because it also had a manual gearbox from an A4. So they halved the torque. Still, there we go. It was quite interesting, and they eventually put that engine into a Q7. I think I'll stick to having my Audis petrol powered though.
Mostly because they make a much better sound.
Audi R8s have always sounded just glorious. And this last one is no exception. Whether V8 or V10, these have always been just fabulous. Perhaps you never knew this. Audi actually means listen, because the company's founder, Augustus Horch, had used his surname in a previous company, and that means listen in German. So he thought, what other language can I use? And he decided on Latin. So Audi, Latin for listen.
And one of the nice things about this last R8 is that it lets you use those sonorous top-end revs with their higher hertz more often, even on the road, thanks to the gearbox.
One of the biggest mechanical changes for this GT rear-wheel drive is in the gearbox, because it's got shorter ratios in it. So that just lets you enjoy this wonderful naturally aspirated engine and all 8,500 RPM more of the time. This S-tronic box is fantastic. The paddles are still annoyingly small and plasticky, a complaint that I've always had. But it's so much better than the frankly terrible R-tronic box that was in the early R8s. Or was it that bad? Perhaps it was just by comparison with the other option. Because the original V8 R8 was launched with, well, possibly the best open-gated manual ever produced. It really stole Ferrari's thunder. It's just so slick. This original V8 is just so good. Arguably, Audi's never improved upon it, to be honest.
Its exterior was penned by Frank Lamberty, and when this original R8 was launched in 2006, it was amazingly the first complete car with a ground-up design to come out of Quattro GmbH, now known as Audi Sport.
So here we are, back at the start, except we can go back further still.
This car is where the R8 name came from.
The R8 is one of the greatest endurance racers of all time. It took an amazing 5 victories between 2000 and 2005 at Le Mans. Even more incredibly, for the first 3 victories, it had the same 3 drivers every single time.
2 of those drivers were Frank Bieler and Emanuele Pirro. The third was a young hotshot called Tom Kristensen.
It was fantastic. It was really a fantastic time, and we did the job. We did the job as good as we could, and that was every time we were in the car. We tried to do as good job as possible.
Together, they were unbeatable around La Sarthe in this extraordinary machine. This one is chassis 405 that took pole position in 2000 and finished second in the race. Owned by Martin Halusa and cared for by Peter Chambers, it really is beautiful, aggressive, but also clean and elegant in its shapes.
I would now, looking back at it, I will rather describe it as kind of, in a way, a little bit of a simple car. You're able to adapt the car in many ways, but I think that was what was genius about it. You just get back in it, and you just get back into Le Mans and during those fantastic years when we did that.
It produces almost identical horsepower to the R8 GT rear-wheel drive, but weighs less than 1,000 kilos. And it wasn't just fast, it was clever. 3 minutes and 16 seconds. That's all. That was the record for the mechanics to change the entire back end of the R8 race car. Gearbox, suspension, wing, the lot.
And that saved us a Le Mans win in 2002, for example. There we had to change the rear end as we had some nimbling issue at that time with our gearbox.
It was revolutionary. So the FIA, of course, banned it. In fact, the restrictions on the dominant R8 piled up as the years went on, which made the wins for the Japanese team Go in 2004 and Champion Racing in 2005 even more extraordinary. Of course, Kristensen was behind the wheel for both.
every time an Audi R8 won at Le Mans, I was one of the drivers. So 5 wins with the Audi R8.
It's no wonder that when the 2003 Audi Le Mans concept was turned into a production car for 2006, it was decided that it should be named R8.
Every time I see one of these cars in the world on the streets, it reminds me on the good times down towards Mulsanne corner, down to Indianapolis, Arnage, the Porsche, all these lap after lap. There's some blood, sweat and pure passion.
Of course, the R8 name might continue, not with this soundtrack attached, of course, but with the long-rumoured, teased even, e-tron version. But even if this is the end for the R8 name, what a fitting finale this GT rear-wheel drive is.